In today's video, we're going to recap the NHL playoff action from last night. We have several injury updates as well, and we have some trade talk concerning the Maple Leafs and the Canucks, and could Jumbo Joe Thornton be heading to Europe? We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover today. Let's start things off with a recap of last night's NHL playoff action. We had several games on last night, including some qualifying round plays, as well as the round robin tournament getting underway to determine the top four seeds in each conference. Now, in that round robin series, we saw the Philadelphia Flyers doing battle with the Boston Bruins. The Flyers handled them easily with a 4-1 victory. Boston was without Tuukka Rask, did not really play their best hockey, and the Flyers were able to capitalize and get the victory. In the other round robin game, we saw the Avalanche defeat the Blues with a 2-1 score and a last second goal by Nazem Kadri. And I mean last second, literally 0.1 seconds on the clock, just barely beat the buzzer for the Avalanche to beat the Blues and take a 2-1 lead. Of course, I did predict as well for the Avalanche to likely win that round robin tournament and get the number one seed. So obviously they're off to a great start, but the Blues played a pretty solid game as well. So we'll see how each team fares going forward. Now, in the earlier qualifying round series, we saw the Arizona Coyotes defeat the Nashville Predators in Game 1. Coyotes got some goals on the power play, as well as a shorthanded marker from Michael Grabner, and the Predators just could not get caught up. I thought Taylor Hall and Phil Kessel seemed to have a decent game. I didn't get to watch a lot of it myself, but obviously, looking back at the highlights, it looks like overall Arizona had a pretty decent game, and they take Game 1 against Nashville. Nashville did go with Saros over Rene in net as well, which was a little bit of a surprise. We've seen a fair bit of surprise goaltending start so far in these NHL playoffs. And we also had the Columbus Blue Jackets against the Toronto Maple Leafs, which we did a live stream last night, which was our first Top Shelf Hockey live stream. If you missed that one, there'll be more coming up. The replay should be posted now as well if you to go back and if you want to have a look at our discussion as the game went on. The Blue Jackets shut the Leafs out 2-0. It was a really tight defensive game on Columbus's part. They were able to shut down the offense for the Leafs, who didn't really overall have a great game. Freddie Anderson allowed a goal to Cam Atkinson, and that was really, it's a one he should have had in my opinion, and then they added an empty netter at the end to seal the deal for a 2-0 victory. So not a great start for Toronto. I know this is something that we've talked about, that if Columbus had good goaltending, which they did from Korpisalo, and the strong defensive play continued, that the Leafs would have a hard battle on their hands, and it looks as though that's exactly what we have there. And we saw the Minnesota Wild shut out Vancouver 3-0. Not a great game out of the Canucks. Jacob Markstrom was in goal for the Canucks, and Stalock for the Wild, which again, another somewhat surprising goaltending move. Stalock played amazing, got the shutout, and the Canucks are now down like the Leafs early on in their playoff series. Now, we did see some pretty significant injuries here over the weekend as well, including the Jets in their Game 1 affair against the Calgary Flames, with Mark Scheifele and Patrick Laine both going down with what looked like to be pretty serious injuries. We did get an update on Scheifele saying that it wasn't as severe as originally thought. I know it looks like he had an MRI done. There was a lot of concern about a cut Achilles. Obviously, it was a bit of a freak hit from Matthew Tkachuk, whose skate come up and got him on the back of the leg. Kind of reminded me what happened with Erik Karlsson a long time ago with Matt Cook against Pittsburgh. And Karlsson was out for a long time, and it's a really severe injury depending on the tear or the cut of the tendon. But it looks as though he might have dodged a bullet. They're not quite clear. We don't know anything further yet on exactly what kind of recovery he's looking at or how long he could be out. All they're saying right now is him and Laine, both who had a wrist injury, are doubtful for Game 2, but doesn't mean they couldn't return later on. But the Jets need to get back here in a hurry because it's a short 5-game series. Calgary takes the next one without those two guys in the lineup. They're in a heap of trouble and not going to have a lot of opportunity to come back. So I guess we'll see how Winnipeg fares. Jesper Fast of the Rangers was also injured. We also saw Raffle of the Flyers both go down. They're both doubtful here for the next few games as well. So injuries are starting to pile up quickly for many of these NHL teams. So obviously it's going to have a major impact, especially in a short series in these early qualifying round matchups. Now, as I mentioned as well, could Jumbo Joe Thornton end up playing in Europe? It certainly seems like a strong possibility, something that was brought up on Saturday headlines on Sportsnet by Chris Johnson. Of course, as we know, Joe Thornton normally does spend time in Switzerland every year, usually in the off-season for a while. His wife is from there. Originally, Thornton met her when he was playing over there during the 04-05 lockout. He played a year in Switzerland, and that's where he met his wife. So they obviously have family there, and they spend time there every summer, usually usually in August, and he's there. I think he's there now or going to be soon. And obviously there's a lot of talk. He could actually potentially sign a contract and play over there. Now, it doesn't mean that he'd stay over there for the whole year. Obviously, Thornton would want to return to the NHL. There's some talk about him returning to San Jose. There's also a lot of talk about him going elsewhere. Certainly not a guarantee, in my opinion, that he goes to the Sharks, but obviously with the 2021 season being delayed until likely December, that gives Thornton an opportunity to get on the ice, get himself in game shape, to make sure that he's fully ready to go when the NHL is ready to return. Obviously, he could put an out clause in that contract that says when the NHL season's up and going that he can be out of the contract, released, and head back to North America to play. So we'll see what happens with Jumbo Joe Thornton, but wouldn't be surprising to see other veterans or even some youngsters do this as well, for especially amongst the 7 teams that are not going to be playing in this 24-team tournament, because they're going to be a long time without game action unless the NHL does end up doing that tournament that we had seen and heard rumors of. There was talk the NHL might put something together later into the fall, September, October sometime, probably later on near the end of the playoffs. I'm not sure exactly how it was going to be. There wasn't many details out there that the 7 teams that are not participating would have some sort of tournament just to get them on the ice and to get them some action. They'd probably have to go through a little mini camp as well, like the other teams have done, but we'll have to see if that proceeds or not. Not really clear. Haven't heard much on that in some time. But for Thornton to play in Europe probably would be wise. Wouldn't be surprised to see others do it as well. Be a nice bump for the European League to get some more star power for North America to come over. And then obviously it's good to get them in shape. So we'll see what happens. I don't think he'll stay over there. But when he does come back, does he go to San Jose? I know he wanted to be traded at the deadline because he wanted to have an opportunity at that Stanley Cup. And he wasn't very happy when it didn't happen. And obviously I'm not sure that San Jose is going to be much better this year, but of course, we do have a bit of a time here, some off-season time for Doug Wilson to kind of reshape this team, and Thornton will have to decide what he wants to do. Even if he does want to go to another team, is there going to be interest? Now, I also want to talk about a recent article from Eric Stevens in The Athletic, who covers the Anaheim Ducks, looking at several different trade possibilities that they could be possibly interested in to make this team a little bit better for next year. A couple of them that really jumped out for me, though, were a couple of Leaf swingers he mentions in the article, which is Kasperi Kapanen and Andreas Johnsson, of course, kind of known as the usual suspects when we talk about potential Leaf trades that we might see in the offseason. Of course, the Leafs, like many teams, are going to more than likely have to shed some salary. I'm not sure that Kyle Dubas can work his way around a flat salary cap without there being at least 1 or 2 victims of that cap crunch. And of course, I think Kapanen, to me, would be the player who's going to have the most value. Now, I had talked about before about the possibility of a Ducks-Leafs trade, but I had them doing that to acquire the right-handed defenseman and Josh Manson that they've been looking for some time. I mean, they need somebody on that right side. Barry and Ceci are going to leave. Not to say that they can make that trade happen. It's going to be a little tougher with a flat cap. I mean, obviously, from a money in, money out perspective, it's not too complicated, but they would have to shed additional money to take a player back like Manson. There's a lot of talk to Bob Murray, the GM of the Ducks, will take them further into their rebuild, try to bring in some more top young talent. I mean, he may not want to move a guy like Manson, but considering he's like 28 years old now, might make more sense for them to go with a younger blue line. They've signed a lot of guys to short-term, 1-2 year, one-way contracts on defense. And just to me, that's some signals that they might be looking to possibly move out another veteran to make some room there on that defense core. So if they're going to move Manson, the Leafs are a prime target. They might have to take more in return to make the money work. Maybe Johnsson and Kapanen. I'm not sure if Leaf fans would want to see that, or if the Ducks would even want to take on 2 more players. They do have a fair bit of forward depth as it is, but of course a lot of them are certainly questionable on where they're going to fit in next year's roster. Obviously, we've seen a lot of moves from the Ducks here in the past year as they struggle to refine themselves. But obviously, in the case of Kapanen, I think he could take on a bigger role. He certainly would have the most value amongst all the Leafs forwards. So the Ducks could be a potential landing spot for him for sure. Like I said, we'll see if they can pull off a trade for a defenseman. They're obviously going to lose CC and Barry, as I mentioned, through free agency, and they're going to have to replace them. They could do that internally, but we'll see. Now, speaking of the Leafs as well, they also had loaned defenseman Mikko Lehtinen, who they signed for the Finnish defenseman coming over from Europe. That was one of the top European defensemen last year. Likely does get a full-time roster spot with the Leafs next year, given the fact that they do have a flat cap. but because he can't play till next year and that season's going to be delayed until the middle of winter, around December, they've loaned him back to Jokerit of the KHL where he signed from, and he will start up there in the fall, and there would be an out clause, like I said, with the same one I talked about with Thornton, that he can come back, join the Leafs when training camp opens. So at least he can get on the ice and get some meaningful hockey in, continue his development while they wait for the next season to get underway. Now, the other trade rumor I want to take a look at is another more information here on Jake Virtanen of the Canucks. We saw the Canucks play their first playoff game last night. Unfortunately, a 3-0 loss to the Wild, and Virtanen was a healthy scratch, as many had predicted. Now, of course, we had heard recently as well, Don Taylor on TSN Radio Vancouver talking about the fact that he feels Virtanen is pretty much done in Vancouver. Virtanen's an RFA, needs a new contract. Travis Green has been his coach through his time in the minors with the Canucks as well as the NHL Canucks, so obviously he's known this player for a long time. Doesn't seem to believe in him. Virtanen's been criticized for his defensive play. He's been criticized for not having a great training camp. Some say he kind of came in not in the greatest shape. I'm not sure what there is for truth to that, but it could be something to it for sure. Obviously, the Canucks lineup last night was somewhat interesting. Even Zach McEwen, who had replaced Virtanen in the lineup during an exhibition game, was a scratch as well. Same with Louis Eriksson. So obviously the Canucks thought they were putting together the best lineup for their best chance to win, and that did not work out. It didn't fare so well last night. With this being a short series, you can't help but wonder if they're going to have to make some changes and give a guy like Virtanen another chance. Obviously, it could help increase his value as well, given the negativity around this player. If they do want to trade his rights this offseason and move on from Virtanen, it would certainly help if he could get into some game action and have some decent playing time so that he could kind of show what he's capable of. Obviously, Virtanen has been a lightning rod of criticism for most of his time in Vancouver, given the fact that he was such a high draft pick and certainly didn't come in with a tremendous offensive output immediately, which players take time to develop. He's still young. He could still be a player that they thought he could be if they give him the right opportunities. But given all the comments around Virtanen, many feel like he is indeed pretty much done, and that his reputation within the Canucks organization just is not good enough to continue his career there. So I guess we'll see what the future holds for Jake Virtanen if he can get in the lineup. But as of right now, all signs are indicating that he likely does get traded rather than be re-signed this offseason. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments around Virtanen, Thornton, everything else we discussed today, and we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.